All right, we are back with a new video, and today we'll be updating the Amazing Race 33 Power Rankings after episode 4. Now, this was an interesting episode. I mean, obviously, it's the first episode after the 19-month hiatus, so it's interesting seeing how these teams have changed and seeing how their lives have changed during the break. But obviously, we also get confirmation about which teams have dropped out, which ones came back in. I mean, it's not too surprising given the preview, so it's good at least getting confirmation about that. But I feel like despite the break, I feel like things didn't really change that much compared to before the break. I don't think any team experienced that big of a decline or significant increase in their racing performance compared to what they were before the break. So on one hand, I'm kind of glad to see that in the sense that it didn't really break the race too much or really screw up the momentum of any teams that were doing well before the start of the race, of the hiatus, I should say. However, on the other hand, I was kind of bummed out because I figured with a 19-month break there would have been more of a difference in performance. But some of that also came down to just how the tasks broke down. So with that, let's just get right into the ranking. We have 7 teams to rank based on their likelihood to win the race. Obviously, a downgrade from 11 we did last week, but that's just the nature of how the season has been. So, starting off the list at number 7, we have the eliminated team from the previous leg, and that is Michael and Mo. Yes, we're talking about them again. They were the first boots of the season. They came back, and they were the first boots again. Mind you, their path to being eliminated again was a bit rocky, in my opinion. So, they actually didn't start off the leg that badly, where they were on the second bus, not the last. They talked about how they were first boots and how they want redemption. I mean, not too surprising there. They were the sixth to reach the roadblock, but then again, it was kind of a equalizer in a way where they were all in the same cart going up. They were the sixth to finish the roadblock, given again the roadblock doesn't allow too many opportunities to pass certain people. Obviously, a lot of it is on that carabiner. And they were even the first to reach the detour thanks to some helpful transportation, but they chose the slower one, that being the belt detour. And I didn't realize going in just how much of a discrepancy there would be between these detours. I thought these could be relatively equal, but it turns out that while the show highlighted more of the difficulties with the flag detour, the belt detour actually turned out to be the much slower one. And we see that with Michael Moe, how despite being the first to reach the detour, they felt all the way to last place by the time they actually finished it, which is really bizarre to me. They're also shown getting lost on the way to the pit stop, and they finished last on the leg and are eliminated once again. So again, I enjoyed their run in the season. Again, I'm kind of disappointed that they were the first ones out again. I didn't really expect that based on how the episode was playing out, but it is what it is. But yeah, it's still crazy that they got a second chance, and they're here at number 7. Now we're moving on to number 6, and we're now moving on to the team still in the race. So I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think it is that they'll win. But at number 6, the team that I think is the least likely to win at this point is Akbar and Cherry. Now, obviously, this was another very rocky leg for them where they were on the last bus. They talked about wanting to find their old spark during the break. They're the last to reach the roadblock, and we really see Sherry struggle a lot on this one due to her fear of heights. Like she's very slow getting around, falls very far behind to the point where other teams are on their way back from the roadblock while she's still on her way down, and they're kind of encouraging her, letting her on. And obviously, that's not great. Obviously, they're the last to finish the roadblock and the last to reach the detour, and they're even show arguing during the detour, but ultimately they choose the much faster detour, apparently the flag one, which allows them to bump up to sixth place. And with Aaron and Natalia getting lost on their way to the pit stop, they move up another spot, allowing them to finish fifth on the leg. So it's kind of crazy how, despite all their troubles on the leg, they were able to finish not too terribly, or at least not second to last. And again, I feel like this leg only highlighted their issues on the race. I mean, they've consistently been towards the back of the pack the entire race. They've been prone to arguments along the way, and I don't see how they win from this point on. I mean, they could just keep scraping by. However, with the competition kind of narrowing down, I could see them getting picked off sooner rather than later. And I don't think the story is backing them up as underdogs to the same extent as certain other teams we'll be talking about. So because of that, I have them here at number six. Now we're moving on to number five, and we're moving on to the other eliminated team that has come back, and that is Arun and Natalia. Now, obviously, I felt like Arun and Natalia had more of setup towards a redemption arc than Michael and Mo, and we kind of get that. Where, again, obviously on the mat, they talk about how Natalia got married during the break, got some personal content there. They were on the second bus, so not too bad, and they're even the third to reach the roadblock, third to finish the roadblock, but they kind of get lost on their way to their detour, end up falling to sixth place once they reach the detour. And obviously, they choose the much slower one, that being the belt one. And they are the fifth to finish the detour. I mean, so some of that might have been due to them just being late to it, but as we saw with Michael and Mo, I mean, it was obviously the slower detour as well. And again, they're the first to finish the Belt Tour, obviously finishing on their first attempt, so that's definitely something to help them out. Even so, they're shown getting lost on the way to the pit stop, and even Akbar and Sherry managed to pass them along the way, and they finished second to last on this leg. So not great of a finish. I mean, this is now the second leg now where we're seeing them getting lost with transportation, and I feel like that issue is just going to continue to haunt them during the rest of the time here, especially now that we know that so much of the race is going to be relying on upon self transportation, like driving cars. I feel like that issue is going to compound until they eventually get eliminated. And even beyond that, like I feel like they haven't demonstrated that much consistency on the race where I feel like they're either towards the front of the pack or they're towards the back of the pack, and there isn't much in between. And with the competition getting more tight, I feel like they're going to get squeezed out. So, because of that, I had them here at number five. Now we're moving on to number four, and this is a team that I keep moving up on each week, and I actually considered putting them up at number three, sort of bumping them up, but I decided that they're better here at number four for now, and we have Lulu and Lala. Now, I'm really starting to grow on Lulu and Lala. I feel like the edit has really shown them in a positive light, and they're not even that bad at the race. So, obviously, the big thing with them is we heard on the mat that their grandma passed away from COVID during the hiatus. And that kind of becomes a storyline in the episode. I mean, what really struck me is that when they were talking about that, they even cut to a flashback of back home of showing the actual grandma. And I thought that was pretty interesting on its own. But even beyond that, I mean, obviously during the roadblock, they were talking about how they feel their grandma's presence during that when they're surrounded by the mountains. So they're really committed to that storyline a bit. I'm curious to see whether it'll pan out over the rest of the season. However, aside from that, they're doing all right on the race. I mean, they were the second to reach the roadblock, second to finish it, and obviously, they were able to stay relatively in the middle of the pack. I mean, they're fourth to reach the detour. They choose the faster one, being the flag one. They're the third to finish. However, we see on the way to the pit stop that apparently them and Raquel and Kayla, they were able to catch up and literally came down to a foot race where ultimately uh, they passed Raquel and Kayla on their way there, and they finished fourth on the leg. So they're doing all right on the race. I was actually kind of surprised that that foot race wasn't uh, more highlighted in the episode, which can be a bit concerning. But I still feel like Lulu and Lala are being set up as relatively serious competitors. I mean, maybe not as strong on the race compared to some other teams we'll be talking about. However, I feel like the storyline is potentially there for them. And I feel like with them already being set up as underdogs earlier on, I mean, and I don't think they're underdogs at this point. I think they're doing just all right on the race. However, I still feel like the show is giving them enough content to where I feel at least somewhat confident that they'll do well on the race. So because of that, I have them here at number four. Now we're moving on to number three. And again, we're inside that top three now. It's the same top three I had last week. And I can legitimately see each of these teams winning. However, at number three, we have the team I think is the least likely to win, and that is Kim and Penn. Now, I'll admit that my opinion of them has gone up over time. I think at this point, they're the second best team on the race just from a pure performance standpoint. I think this episode kind of helped them out edit wise as well. So obviously they were on the first bus on the way to the roadblock. I mean, they talked about how they want to prove to their kids that they can finish what they started. So I felt like that alone gave them some personal content and a storyline for them potentially moving forward. However, it is a bit later on, and now granted, some of that is because it was after the break, but even still, I feel like they could have definitely gotten some more propping up earlier on. They're the fifth to reach the roadblock, but we see Penn get really aggressive on his way back from the roadblock. He passes Raquel and Kayla, making them fourth to finish. They proceed to pass Arun and Lulu on the way back, so they really jump up to second place as a result. And obviously through that, they're the second to reach the detour. And despite seeming more equipped for the flag detour, they don't have immediate success and fail their first few attempts. I mean, we see Kim even talk about her choreography background and how she was nervous, but ultimately it was her playing for her family that helps her get through. And they're able to be the second to finish the detour, and they finish second on the leg. So again, I think from a pure performance standpoint, I would have them at second. I mean, if you look at their track record, yeah, their first two legs weren't that great with fourth and fifth place finishes, but they won the last leg and they came in second on this leg. And I think they're really demonstrating themselves to be strong racers, and I think that's going to carry over moving forward. And I think this episode gave them a bit more personal content to where there is a possible storyline there. However, I feel like the top two teams have been more consistently backed up by the edit. And I mean, with one team, they're just getting outclassed by them. So I had them here at number three. Now we're moving on to number two. And again, we have another pretty strong contender for me, and that is Raquel and Kayla. Now, I talked about them before and how they haven't had the most consistency on the race. However, I feel like this was definitely a good leg for them. So, right out the bat, we see them talk about on the mat how they lost their jobs as flight attendants during the break, how that was hard for them, sort of dealing with that. And from there, I mean, we see them do relatively well on the leg where they're on the first bus getting there. They're the fourth to reach the roadblock, but they get passed, I mean, by Kim and Penn, making them fifth to finish. They're the fifth to reach the detour. And, like obviously they choose the flag one. And along the way, they kind of struggle a bit. I mean, they also have a confession about girl power. So, and them being a all female team, which again kind of reinforces that storyline. I feel like that's definitely something that they really want to stick with throughout the season. I mean, they're the fourth to finish the detour, but we see them catch up to Lulu and Lala. I mean, and it even comes down to a foot race. Now, again, as I talked about Lulu and Lala, like I didn't like how that wasn't focused on more, how essentially came down to this foot race. I mean, that's something that I thought would have been a bit more interesting, but they do catch up to Lulu and Lala and they pass them, allowing them to get a third place finish. So I think on the whole, this was a good leg for them. Definitely better than the last leg where they got sixth. I mean, I think the storyline is there for them to make a deep run, at least get towards the end of the game. Now, I don't know if they'll actually win. I mean, given their competition, but I think the storyline is there so that they could at least get to that final leg as potential underdogs and like surpass Kim and Penn and the team we'll be talking about next. But for now, I have them here at number two. And now at number one, the team I think is most likely to win the Amazing Race 33 is Ryan and Dusty. Yeah, that wasn't too surprising there. Again, this was another great episode for them. So obviously, again, good continuing the storyline of talking about them in prison, although probably not as pronounced as some of the other storylines. But we do hear on the mat Ryan talk about how like being quarantined is like being back in prison. So that's at least something. But again, so much of the reason that I had them at number one is their performance on the race. They have been the most consistent team up to this point, where they're the first to reach the first bus that is. They get a more extensive confessional talking about how they need to be more well rounded and how they're well equipped for the roadblock and dealing with heights. They're the first to reach the roadblock. They're the first to finish the roadblock. They're a bit slow. I mean, not slow per se, but they definitely get slowed down by the fact that they miss the cart going back down the mountain, obviously, sort of acting as an equalizer, causing them to be the third to reach the detour. They choose the flag one. they're shown struggling a bit, and we actually get a bit of a cliffhanger where they're considering switching detours, which obviously would have been a massive mistake. But we see them stick with it, like especially after seeing Kim and Penn fail their first attempt. They talk about how that's sort of like a shark seeing blood in the water. They're the first to finish the detour, and they win the leg. So they're the first team to get their second win. Obviously, they've been pretty dominant up to this point with 2 wins, a second place finish. Uh, so 2 wins and two second place finishes, mind you. And again, that's been a really impressive performance at this point. They really didn't seem to slow down that much from after the break. I thought there might have been some concerns there, but they seem to be picking up right where they left off. And I think they're in it for the long haul. I think they're the most likely team to at least get to the final leg. And barring any major collapses, I think they have a very good shot of winning the race. Now, granted, their storyline probably hasn't been focused on as much as some of the other teams, but I think there's enough there to justify it. And considering the fact that they've been as strong on the race as they have been, I feel like number one is a good place to put them. And once again, I consider them the team most likely to win the Amazing Race 33. And there we go. That will do it for this week's power rankings for the Amazing Race 33. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll be back again next week to talk more about Amazing Race, but also I'll be covering other shows. Australian Survivor starting up soon, so I plan to cover that. Obviously, Celebrity Big Brother is starting up soon, so I'll at least do some coverage for that. It's a lot of exciting stuff moving forward. But for now, that is the video. See ya.